Stephen Scheeler, the CEO with Omniscient. Thanks for joining us on our Tech and Sec Weekly.
Good to be here.
Great to see you again. We last caught up 2019. We did a podcast on the Cybersecurity Weekly podcast. And I just mentioned pre-interview, I think of you often from that interview because you kind of predicted a little bit to say within a short few number of years, we'll all have our AI assistant. And that's the sort of the technology we're talking back just 4 years ago. And here we are, 2023 is the ChatGPT sort of year as it sort of takes over all industries and all sectors. So it won't be too far away when we do have that applied as our own personal assistant. How are you thinking sort of when you think back to 2019 and where we are now? Are we on track, going faster than what you might have thought? Or, where do you see this heading?
So I think we're going faster than I would have expected. 2019, 4 years ago. I knew, obviously, I'm in AI now. There's a lot of work going on in the background. I've known these large language models have been developed for some time, but we had challenges in 2019 around just raw computing power, data issues. The models weren't working, weren't reliable, weren't scalable. And what did change, though, is OpenAI. Give a lot of credit to them. Back they were founded in about 2016, I believe. So they've been around a few years, but they've really been working diligently on this problem, probably accelerating beyond what even Google and others have been doing. And I think it's mainly because they were focusing on one thing. Google's a big company; they've got a lot of people, but they have a lot of things going on. But they really just focused on one thing, and then they made a few changes a couple of years ago from a sort of a not-for-profit to a for-profit company. You might remember those days. They were a foundation at one time. And then they stitched up the deal with Microsoft, which is largely around sort of cloud and computing power. And obviously they got to some big step changes along the way. So I was surprised to see it happen quite so quickly. Now that it's out there, I think there's a bit of a hype cycle we're in now. It's like, this is going to change everything, and I'm going to use it for everything. But then you're starting to see there's still a lot of flaws in the model, or in the models, and I'm sure yourself or others who use these tools now, we all use to an extent AI and everything we use. But if you're explicitly using ChatGPT 4 or 3.5 or whatever, or Anthropic or other tools, you'll start to see that they're good for certain tasks. They're not so good for other tasks. And they really need to be trained on domain level content and data, and that's the next level we're going to get to. So my prediction of having your own personal assistant, we're not quite there yet. I think that's going to take a little while for some of these domain level applications to be developed, but they're happening pretty quickly now. You see things like travel, things like media, marketing, content creation, coding. You've got some pretty amazing co-pilots now that almost are your kind of personal concierge almost. So it's happening fast.
And it's the sort of the snowball effect, the exponential growth, that once that one problem is solved, it kicks in, and then it can have very wide coverage across all sectors. And that does bring us to your sort of latest venture. We were speaking 2019. By 2020, you were the CEO of Omniscient Neurotechnology. Fascinating company, and winning some awards quite rightly, it seems, in terms of mapping the human brain and its applications in medical science. But there's a whole broader applications here. And this is in relation to Security Expo at ICC Sydney, 31 August and 1st of September, the Security Industry Conference. So there is security implications for this, both on human security as well. Maybe just introduce the audience to Omniscient.
Absolutely. So Omniscient means all-knowing. It's a company we founded in 2019, and our mission is to improve the lives of billions of brains through AI. We are the open AI of the human brain. We are probably the most advanced company in the world at using AI to decode the human brain. Now, this is a field that actually has a name. It's called connectomics. You all know genomics is genetics. Well, that was something 30 years ago. Nobody knew what that was. Now it's everyday word. And that's the application of big data AI to the human genome. Well, we apply AI, big data to the human brain. called connectomics, about the connections of the brain. It's a field of neuroscience that's been around for a decade or more now. We're probably the first company in the world that's now starting to commercialize this science and commercialize the AI of using AI to look at the human brain. Your brain is far more complex than any of the models that are being built now by OpenAI or these other large language models. Your brain's got trillions and trillions of different connections, many more parameters than even exist in these large language models today. So the mountain we are climbing is actually higher than that the likes of OpenAI is climbing. I wish I had the $10 billion that they have. I've got a little less.
Yeah.
But even we've raised about 50 million US over the past few years. We've got a team of about 50 people, half of them here in Sydney, the rest overseas. And we've started to focus on medical applications as a start. Over time, we think we can build what we call non-medical applications. And what we do is we decode the brain by doing two things. One is we build maps, digital maps of the major networks in individuals' brains. All of our brains have 7 major networks. Some of these have been known to science for some time, relatively easily mappable by things like MRI scans and a little manipulation of that data. But the others of those networks have been very hard to find. They were unknown to science until recently. And we're really the first group in the world that can map those. And many of those networks are related to your higher cognitive functions, your ability to multitask, your ability to focus, your ability to control your emotions, your ability to have emotions.
Yeah.
So those networks are very important. The understanding of them are very important in understanding things like brain health. And so from we call it an atlas, a connectivity atlas. From that atlas now we built our first tools for brain surgeons. So neurosurgeons now around the world, particularly in the US, which is our focus market, now use our technology to plan their surgery. If they're going to take out a tumor from your brain, they need to understand what networks they're cutting through to get to that tumor, and they want to try to minimize the damage they do. So we now visualize those networks for them, allow them to choose a better path, and allow them to have conversations about what are the trade-offs between the damage they can do by removing the tumor versus the advantages of removing the tumor. So that's a big deal. It's changing neurosurgery as we speak. Then beyond that, we have a second part of our technology, which is called our matrix, our connectivity matrix. So you've got a map or an atlas. A matrix measures basically the performance of those networks versus a healthy brain. So not just where they're located, but how well are they performing? Are they performing healthfully, or are they actually malfunctioning somehow? And the malfunction is things like neurodegeneration or mental illness. And so now, quite literally, we are the first group in the world that can map mental illness inside somebody's brain. It's almost like an X-ray for the brain. We call it the blood test for mental illness, sort of looking for analogies. And so with that tool, we believe we have the potential to revolutionize things like psychiatry and mental illness diagnosis and treatment. And we're already pushing down that path now. We've added some large language model and sort of generative AI to our connectomic AI mix. We're now building a mental illness diagnostic co-pilot that essentially we hope can be even better than a human at diagnosing and recommending treatment for hundreds of mental illnesses. So it's a big deal. As we all know, mental illness is an epidemic, and we're not solving that problem with humans alone. We really need AI to solve that problem.
And it looks like it's a lot of computer vision applications here as well. But obviously the former policeman in my mind comes to mind in terms of looking for signs of deception and those kind of things. How much control do you think moving forward this technology will require? Because it looks like it's taking imagery. Is it taking live video imagery, or is it taking sort of slices of imagery in that context of how you would potentially monitor how someone's thinking?
Yeah, well, currently, so we don't measure things like memories or sort of sentient thoughts. I don't know we don't map what your thoughts are. We're not recording your thoughts. There are other technologies that try to do things like that, levels of success. That's not what we focus on. We focus on where the networks are and how well they're functioning in order to build tools that help them function better, rather than drilling into what your consciousness is telling you or what you're thinking. That said, the brain is essentially the seat of many of your most in terms of all the data we have right today, every time you pick up your phone or look at your computer or surf the web, your data is being exposed to somebody. Even you walk down the street, cameras are taking your image. Well, one thing that doesn't happen though is there's no sensor looking inside your head, looking at your brain, looking at your networks or your thoughts or your memories. But that is going to start to change, and we are building a tool that can help do that. Now, we don't do this by facial recognition or anything else. It's done by a standard MRI. So it is actually, at the moment, our data acquisition is an MRI. That's a that's a medically recommended procedure that sits within the medical system. And the good things about the world of medicine in most countries is that data is very tightly controlled. So all the data that we have, for example, is de-identified. So we actually don't know, even though our tools have now been used in the diagnosis or treatment of thousands of patients around the world, we don't know who those patients are. We don't know their name. It's all de-identified data. And the data that we use to build our models is all de-identified data as well. So it's anonymized brain data. That said, the tools that we could build in the future have levels of, I guess, kind of insight that might be have potential for abuse, have potential for uses that we as a company might not be comfortable with. And so we're very conscious, at least both in terms of ethics and security, about how ethically our tools are used. And we're one of these AI companies that's changing the world, but we have a very strong ethical bent. I have a big tech background. I worked at Facebook for many years. I learned a lot about the world of ethics, do's and don'ts during my time at Facebook. My other two co-founders are both doctors. One's a neuroscientist, one's a neurosurgeon. So they have a very strong kind of Hippocratic oath commitment to doing human good. And we have a board and investors that support our mission for human good, not for just purely for profit. And I really do think we need to be motivated by that in order to build the right kinds of technology when we're talking about the brain.
Is there a crossover with computer brain interface technology with this platform as well?
There is.
I'll call it a platform loosely.
Yeah. So in simple terms, if you look at the likes of Neuralink or Synchron, if you haven't heard of Synchron, they're an Australian founded startup in New York now. Brilliant guys. Tom Oxley, a guy originally from Melbourne, a couple of his partners. The great Aussie company. They're ahead of Neuralink, by the way. Just check them out. They're actually far ahead of Neuralink. They've got a different method to be able to kind of interface with your brain. But if you look at any of those companies, what are they trying to do? They're trying to build technology that somehow, and hardware generally, or some sort of hardware device that gets embedded into your brain, and then helps your brain do something different or better than it could before. They're mainly focused right now on things like paralysis. So looking at the motor cortex and be able to access it where somebody's paralyzed for some reason. Now, that's great. Being able to speak or be able to move or be able to have some sort of movement when that's been removed by some sort of spinal cord injury or some injury to the brain. That's fantastic. The fact is, it's a relatively small kind of total market there. There's 100 million people or so that are in that condition in the U.S., in the world. But there's billions more that have things like mental illness and neurodegeneration. And so they're really focused on that use case now, mainly because that's a part of your connectome that's actually fairly easy to locate, find, and kind of wire into. But we have relationships with all those guys. Well, they're not our customers today, but long-term we think they will be. And the reason is they're going to go beyond the motor cortex. Eventually, they're going to build tools for emotional regulation or for neurodegeneration or for other things where the human-machine interface is going to have value. And they're going to need the kind of maps that we build. We're essentially almost for them, we're like the cartographer, we're the map maker.
Yeah.
And I always say wherever the brain is going to be in the future, and you're going to be either treating it because it's unhealthy or you're going to be making it better, even though it is healthy, you're going to need the best maps. We build those maps. So they will all become our customers in the fullness of time.
Nice. Well, look, the object here is to keep the audience wanting more, but I've got about a million questions, but I'm going to keep it short. My last sort of point here is what would be your key message, or what will be your message next month at the Security Expo when you're talking to the security industry on this technology? Again, what's your sort of key message for them?
I think and I'm really looking forward to joining. I love the ICC, and I love speaking, particularly with Funny thing, in the last couple of years, I've spoken to a lot of security professionals about the challenges they're facing. And one of the biggest challenges that we're all facing is just the speed with which things are advancing, right? That, the endpoints that everybody has, everybody's got a plethora of devices that are walking out the door that don't belong to the enterprise, so they have to be secure. You've got issues with the types of data, the volume of data that's flowing around those networks. You've got issues with the sensitivity of that data, not just for us, we have sensitivity, it's brain data, we have compliance issues around how we deal with hospitals, how we deal with the medical system. There's a ton of regulation around that. But even where the regulation doesn't exist, you've got reputational problems. You've got, customer retention problems. You've got, media problems when a data leakage or a breach happens. And so, cybersecurity has gone from, I can remember when it was something the geeks in the corner used to handle. Now it is a boardroom #1 issue. It is a CEO #1 issue. We've got CEOs here in Australia for whom, it went from nowhere to being their #1 problem because of some of the issues that have happened. And so I think for me, for professionals in this area, the key thing for you to be able to be successful in the future is to be able to talk to those leaders, to be able to translate what you do into their speak, and to be able to align yourself with the enterprise and the bigger goals of the enterprise. And my cyber guy here at Omniscient is absolutely fantastic at understanding what my business goals are, what my strategy is, what success looks like, how decisions get made. And I think that is the key to being successful in the future, and really, taking the cyber and the security conversation to the highest levels in the organization.
I think, as you say, being a business enabler is as you go. Look, you're at the forefront of some amazing technology. It sounds like you always have been anyway, Stephen, and best of luck. It's definitely one to watch. I've been calling it Omniscient. You call it Omniscient, but
my American accent.
I think it could be your New York accent. But Stephen, Scheeler, the CEO with Omniscient, thank you very much, and we'll see you next month at the Security Expo in Sydney.
Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to it.